And we're live. So with me, I have, what do you prefer to be called? Um,
Live or live.
a live, a live,
Live works.
live works. Okay. And does your husband want to introduce himself? I mean, we're live and on the air, so whichever name you want to be called while on air, sir.
Oh, certainly I can be referred to as Dew, like the Mountain Dew minus the mountain.
Okay, so we have live and do, and we're first I'm going to ask them about what what their thoughts about the Lawrence Southern incidents, but then we're just gonna move on to the alt rights. And Liv is a feminist and her husband is a conservative, and I'm a centrist. So I do think that there is diverse viewpoints here. It's not like an echo chamber. It's, a feminist, a centrist, and a conservative. For first, let's talk about Lauren Southern. What did you think of it?
Okay, well, I know Dew has not seen the video, but a recap for people who don't know what video we're talking about. She recently went to a women's march in somewhere in England. I don't think it was London. I'm not sure exactly where in England it was, but she was asking the women there, which would you rather have, women's rights or Islam? And people thought this was a kind of ridiculous question. And to a certain extent, it's sad we're not live because Dew's face was sort of hilarious. But she was asking, what would you rather have, women's rights or Islam? And around minute 1:30, she was saying, she said, well, because one of the women she asked said, well, why are you asking me? Why aren't you asking a Muslim woman about women's rights in Islam? And she said, well, they're not here. Maybe their husbands won't let them. And the woman did mention, there's a lot of violence in the Bible. And she was a Catholic. She read the Bible, knew that there was a lot of violence in the Bible. And just because there's violence in the Quran doesn't mean the religion has to be inherently violent. And Lauren said, yeah, well, you don't see Christians driving vans into crowds. So recap on that one. A typical Lauren Southern video of great journalism or such. My thoughts on that. The way she framed that question showed a huge ignorance of Islam. I mean, just like with Christianity, there is not one sect in Islam. There's a lot of different schools of thought. And yeah, if we're talking about Wahhabism, which is very influential in Saudi Arabia, Wahhabism and women's rights don't seem to get along at all. But Wahhabism is not all of Islam. That's my 2 cents.
Yeah, my 2 cents, my first reaction was I failed to understand, why does it come down to a choice between two? And it's like, what are we trying to solve by that question, that example? I was, as Liv stated it, I'm like, I failed to understand the value of this, was my first reaction to it.
Yeah, my reaction is that it didn't seem like real journalism. I mean, she sounded like a high school teenager with the whole, would you rather, date Mrs. Berkeley or would you rather date the school principal? It's just, it seems really juvenile. It doesn't come across as real journalism. And I am going to screen share for a bit because this is one of the interesting points that Roaming Millennial also made, because Roaming Millennial made a great video explaining Islam to her followers, where there are different sects. There's, the Sunni Muslims, there's all of these different branches, the Shia, there's the Kawari, don't know how well I'm pronouncing it, and I hope everybody can see the screen, but there are different types of Muslims. There's just not the Sunni Muslims, and that's it, and that's the be all end all. Just like the Westboro Baptist Church doesn't represent all Christians. You wouldn't say to a Christian, have you went outside and protested a gay pride parade? Because you know that not all Christians are like Westboro Baptist Church, that there are
Yeah,
different
I mean,
Christians.
So you bring up an excellent point here. And as I sit here and I look at this wonderful graphic, the first question that comes to my mind, I don't know what this Miss Sutherland's background is, but I would assume she's versed with all of this, and she's an authoritarian to be able to speak on all of the different factions of the belief. I mean, who is this Lauren Southern? Why are we even talking about her? I'm sorry, I just fail to see how she's relative to this.
Yeah.
I mean, does she have a doctorate's degree or something in this particular faith to be able to throw such a question out? And these rhetorical questions, not really looking for answers, but that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, because it's kind of a lot like she does call herself a journalist. She does call herself like a reporter, and she does have a pretty wide audience. Not the widest I've seen, but it's a decent subscribers. It's 400K subscribers, so it is rather large. So, and were a lot of people who agree with it, but it really seemed like something that a teenager would come up with. Like, it is, you don't learn anything new. It's not informative. You don't come out of it thinking, I learned something new today, or I would presume that the people who enjoyed it are the people who already enjoyed that type of content. She didn't convert anybody. She didn't change any minds. It's not thought provoking. It's not.
There's no education as to what Islam is and where the actual, because I mean, it's not that we can't criticize different schools of thought within Islam. There's definitely problems, and in here, like, they're talking more about sects, but not necessarily schools of thought. So like the school of thought of Wahhabism, you can see that in different sects within Islam. And that's the one where, the mild level of Wahhabism is what you're seeing in Saudi Arabia, which is very oppressive. And then you get extreme Wahhabism in terms of ISIS. And yeah, that criticizing that, I think, is more specific. It's more accurate. And also, it's not going to alienate all the progressive Muslims, and there are numbers of them. So, what she's doing, I just don't quite get. She's just being nasty and racist. Also, her depiction, when I know she did an interview of Muslims in front of a mosque, and she was going to interview all the dark-skinned Muslims, not really representing a true picture of it. The other thing, the whole would you rather, women's rights or Islam. This may be before your time. I'm not sure your age, but I remember in the first Clinton campaign, there was the great late night show question that they were asking the candidates, which are you, boxers or briefs? I mean, it's a stupid, silly question that in that context was kind of funny. But when you're doing that, I mean, it's just racist and divisive.
And I wanted to touch on this because we were talking about this earlier, but this is Queen Rania of Jordan, who is a Muslim woman, and her husband actually left her out of the house. Ridiculous.
Yeah, and my God, I don't see her covered up one bit. Hair, she's got gorgeous hair. I mean, she's a very beautiful woman. Not covered head to toe. Yeah, I mean, she's dressed, you would say modestly. I mean, she's not showing tons of skin, but I mean, she's got a V-neck in one of those pictures. She looks like any, very Western looking, I guess you would say. Also quite fair skinned. She's kind of paler than I am.
Right.
Like, if the alt-rights were to see her or a woman who looked like her, they'll be telling her to breed more white babies and to like pump those white babies out. They have like 6 white children, 7, 12.
Yeah. And Queen Rania does have a YouTube channel. She does a lot of speaking. She's worked with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Now, I'm sure the monarchy in Jordan, there are a million problems with that. I am not versed enough, so I'm sure there's some issue somewhere. But I mean, if you're trying to say, oh yes, all women in Islam are oppressed, fully covered up, and can never speak, she's worldwide more famous than her husband is, and I think more popular than her husband is. I mean, King Abdullah, a lot of people wouldn't know who he is necessarily, but she's a bit more recognizable and has done TED Talks. You can go to her YouTube channel, and I mean, she's done a lot of public speaking, so she's allowed to go outside of the house and speak in public in front of mixed groups of men and women.
Yeah, you see this beautiful Muslim woman, and apparently she's allowed out the house, and apparently she's allowed to speak without needing to get her husband's permissions first.
Yeah, and she speaks a lot on cross-cultural issues and bridging cross-cultural divides and getting along with people. And yeah, sometimes she does cover her hair for various religious purposes, but I mean, so do a lot of Catholic women wear head coverings when they go to mass.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's a very good point. And I hope that everybody in the audience is able to have a really good look of this woman, a Muslim queen. And I'm not saying that all of Muslims are like this. I'm just giving a counter example to what Lawrence Southern was saying, because she was painting all of Muslims under the same brush, and let me show this graph again. There are different sets of Muslims, just like there are different sets of Christianity. You're not going to condemn all of Christianity based off what Westboro Baptist does. You're not going to punish the Catholics for what Westboro Baptists do. You're not going to say to Catholic, hey, did you protest the gay pride parade? And you're not going to go to Westboro Baptist person and go, hey, has your preacher molested a child? It's you're
and also they do in that graph have the Druze starred. They're not always considered Muslims, and yeah, I mean, the Druze get massacred by other sects of Islam. I mean, and really a lot of who ISIS is killing are other Muslims that they view as apostates who don't have the right kind of religion. And if you think back in the history of Christianity, the Spanish Inquisition was mostly weeding out Christian heretics. It was Christians killing other Christians, not necessarily. I mean, the Spanish Inquisition also went after people who were Jewish, people who were just not Christian at all. But a lot of it was against Christian heretics. A lot of who ISIS is going after is who they view as Muslim heretics. And yes, they are also killing Christians. They are also killing Jewish people. They are killing other people. But you can't ignore that a lot of that is with a fight within Islam, that Islam is by no means a monolithic religion where everyone believes the same thing.
Just like Christianity.
Yeah, he said just like Christianity. Because now, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about it from religion standpoint on you on religion.
Well, I mean, I think you hit it. I mean, I'd love to see an equivalent graph of Christianity because, obviously there are Christian groups that don't promote dancing, drinking, and, all sorts of beliefs that are different from other Christian groups. So yeah, it's probably a very similar kind of setup in the Christian faith versus the Muslim faith.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a very strict Christian household, and I don't know if you guys could see this, but I'm looking at the Times, and it says meets three Muslims voting for Donald Trump. So there would actually be Muslims who would have probably enjoyed Lauren Southern's content. You know, I don't know if they enjoyed her anymore, but what she posted could, you know, alienate part of her fan base if she had any Muslim fans, because there were Muslim Trump voters, because I do remember on Twitter I would see like immigrants for Trump, Muslims for Trump, gays for Trump, blacks for Trump. There were all these different categories of people who were actually, you know, for Trump, you know?
Yeah, well, and actually that makes me think of a point that kind of gets overlooked on Muslims in America and the voting history there. For a very long time, they've mostly voted Republican. And it wasn't until somewhat after September 11th that you started to see Muslims shifting over to vote more Democratic. A lot of Muslims in the US they came from Iran during 70s, 80s with the Ayatollah, and they were big, huge Ronald Reagan fans because they hated what the Ayatollah was doing. Reagan was tough on the Ayatollah. A lot of Muslims were very Republican and always went Republican. But then after September 11th, when now George W. Bush, initially his rhetoric was very, look, this is not, because being a Republican and knowing that, yeah, Muslims tend to be Republican, he wanted to make sure not to alienate them. Smart move. But as the Republican Party rhetoric started to get more and more anti-Muslim, it started to push Muslims away from the Republican Party to the Democrats. So sometimes this really reductive anti-Muslim rhetoric, if you were a conservative, you just lost some voters.
Yes, that's exactly what I wanted to say. That was precisely what I wanted to say. Because if, you know, Lawrence Sutter, she probably had a Muslim fan base. They may have been small, but she probably had a Muslim fan base who were also tired of the radical Muslims, and they listened to her and they're like, yeah, we support you, Lauren. We, you know, totally agree with you. But then after, you know, saying that, you know, a Muslim probably went and allowed their wife out the house, she probably alienated her Muslim fan base, because it has the tone that each and every single last Muslim is like that. That is up there with, you know, maybe a black person is out shooting, you know, a bunch of people up, or, you know, person is robbing, or, you know, it's up there with things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and now I don't know if Lauren necessarily had tons of Muslim fans, but if it's that kind of rhetoric that is getting conflated with the right wing, you know, if you're a Muslim who views yourself as politically right, you know, and you hear that kind of rhetoric, you'd be like, well, maybe this group isn't for me, and I'll go over to the Democratic side and do.
I'm sitting here reflecting on this Lauren Southern individual that we are talking about, and you know, for me, it's like this individual's she's not relevant, and everything I've heard and read, she's just out there saying outlandish things to make herself relevant, and I really do question her following. Are they following her because she's bringing, you know, an awareness and intelligence around her positions, and getting back to where we started with this entire conversation? You know, the comparison between, please fill in the exact details again. Muslim, would you rather be supporting Muslim,
or which would you rather have, Islam or women's rights?
Thank you. Okay, I don't know. I can't decide if I want an apple or an orange. I just, again, can't understand the purpose of the question. So, yeah, this is interesting sitting listening to both of your perspectives, but I think we're talking about somebody who's not relevant, in my own opinion.
Yeah.
She's young. The education certainly isn't there behind her, backing her position. She's bringing probably positions forward that, are nothing more than what she learned through her childhood or, through some exposures of her short-lived life. So that's my 2 cents on this.
Wait a minute. Now you're a conservative and a Republican, and I've heard that you're leaving, or do you want to go into detail about that?
Well, if you want to talk about sort of where you are on the political spectrum and
sure. I was raised in a pretty much a Republican household, very fiscal conservative, Catholic upbringing, and that was the foundation of my 47 years of my life. And, I'm very conservative on many aspects. Talking to Liv and feminism and everything, I find that actually I'm just very conservative when it comes to the financial side of things. When we get into, humanities kinds of issues, I do find that I'm probably more centrist and probably a little bit more liberal than I want to give myself credit for. But, I value diversity very, very, very much, whether it's religion, culture, race, sex, it doesn't really matter. I mean, every single one of those components really bring a lot of value. So I don't know if that's a traditional conservative viewpoint, but I feel as though no matter what we want to label ourselves, we can sit down and have intelligent conversations and hear each other. And, again, this is kind of counterproductive to what Lauren Southern's even doing. She's, creating this divisive approach and even putting an option on the table. It's like, that's why I shake my head at it. So, again, that's kind of my position and my background. I don't know if that answers the question, but hopefully paint a little bit of a picture of where I come from.
Yeah, I was wondering if you would still consider yourself a Republican, or did you switch to Democrat, or would you?
I appreciate that question. Thank you for teeing that up. At this stage of the game, I'll be honest with you, I'm sick of both parties. Both parties really frustrate me because they can't sit down at the table and work together. So to answer your question very bluntly, no, I'm not switching parties. I mean, I did attempt to go to being independent here a few years back, but the problem for the folks that choose that path is they pretty much eliminate their opportunity to go in primaries. So I kind of had to choose one of the two in order to be able to cast a vote at that point. And I think the way our system is set up is, I don't like the two-party system. I really want to get to the point where we can have multiple parties to choose from. I want the two parties really take positions that represent the majority of the public.
You were breaking up on me. I could barely hear or understand you.
No.
I could barely hear you too.
Oh, we were getting an echo here. Second, can you hear?
I could barely hear you. You're coming in and out. Like I could hear like every other word.
1 second.
Can you hear me? One thing that I did catch last is that you're sick and tired of both parties. That's the last thing I heard really clearly. And I feel where you're coming from, because as a centrist, I think both sides suck because both sides are playing identity politics. And I am tired of identity politics. I don't really care that much if you're a man. I don't really care that much if you're a woman. I mean, I'm not going to vote for Hillary Clinton just because she's a woman. I didn't, that really annoyed me. It really annoyed me, the idea that I should vote for Hillary Clinton because she's a woman. So I actually ended up voting for Donald Trump, because the idea that just because she's a woman, I should vote for her, I thought that was very divisive, and irritating and very annoying, or the alienating parts of her fan base. But you know what I mean, alienating potential voters, where it's like, if you are a white male, don't even bother voting for me. And the way I view it, I mean, since when, the political parties become exclusive? Since when is it, if you're a black female, vote Democrats, but if you're a white male, vote Republican? Since when have the parties divided under racial lines? Before, it was kind of like as many votes as possible. Like, if you can breed, vote for me. Or it's like, if you want, like, if you want, feminism taught in school, vote Democrats. And if you believe in capitalism, and if you believe in, like, whatever, just vote Republican. But now it's kind of like it's like identity politics on both sides, I think. I think I'm getting from the left identity politics, care that somebody's female, care that somebody's a female or whatnot, care about race and whatnot. But I feel like I'm starting to get that from the rights as well, where I'm just getting more identity politics. So, were you able to fix your mic? Do you want to try speaking? I still can't hear you. I still am not able to hear you. And no, you're not muted. Um, you're not muted. If you want to, could try. You still have the Hangout link. What you could try doing is jumping out and jumping back in, and we could see if that works. And I would just check. I would look at chat to see if anybody says anything. Um, but yeah. So Liv dropped out, but she's gonna jump back in a few moments, and we'll see if
Hello?
we'll see if that works. I can hear you now.
Okay, good. Yeah, we jumped back out, back in. Sorry, we can hear you perfectly fine.
Yeah.
There's a bit of an echo though when we're talking, but I think we can work around that.
Yeah, so were you able to hear any of what I said?
Oh,
Yep.
absolutely, Ren. And, getting back to your, kind of discussion point around, the two-party system and everything. It's interesting to hear you voted for Trump. I personally voted for Johnson. Not to say that I'm 100% in agreement with everything that Johnson really brought to the table, but he was a candidate that, first off, I wanted to vote for a third party. I believe we just need an additional option out there. And this whole 15% of, some type of preliminary polling as a requirement to get them onto the stage. I think that if he had an opportunity to be out there, his numbers would have climbed very quickly in comparison to both Trump and Hillary. So, that's was the position. But getting back to, when we were starting to break up a little bit, just want to reiterate the point that right along the same lines as you, I am tired of the divisiveness that the two parties bring to the table. I'm very disgusted with their inability to yeah, nice picture. Their inability to sit down at the table and learn how to compromise and to really work together to solve our problems. And, both sides take the stance that I'm not going to do anything with this in any way, shape, or form so that they look bad. And when they take that approach, we don't move forward. So I'm although I've been a Republican, I have to do that to vote in the primaries. And, but that's, I don't like my options right now.
Yeah. Now, I think it should come as a shock to absolutely no one that I did vote for Hillary, but don't worry, I won't bring out the magnet that went out when Hillary got the Democratic nomination. In case there is anyone who would find that very scary. But no, I mean, And did I like everything about Hillary? No. I personally kind of would have liked to see Bernie win, but I mean, I could bring myself to vote for Hillary, even though a lot of her policies, I'm way further left. So I had my issues with her. I did find it annoying during the primaries when you had some people, some kinds of, and I think it was Betty Friedan, the feminist, who was saying, that basically women who aren't voting for Hillary and are supporting Bernie are betraying their gender. It's like, no, I mean, also the idea that women should be women first and not care about other things. I think that is kind of reducing women to their gender, and that's been a problem for millennia, and I don't really like that. So yes, you can still be a feminist and have not been 100% behind Hillary or even voted for her, though. I mean, voting for Trump and being a feminist, not because of that he's a man, but just based on his policies, I would say that may be a little tricky. But I wouldn't, if someone was trying to give a coherent argument as to how that could happen, I wouldn't not listen. But yeah, now with identity politics, I'm not a fan of, divisive white nationalist identity politics. I do think sometimes there's a tendency that anytime a issue is brought up that predominantly affects one group over another, and trying to dismiss that as, oh, it's identity politics. Well, no, it's just when you're trying to make public policy, sometimes looking at group patterns and group behaviors is what you have to do. To figure out if we're going to make a policy, we do need to look at group demographics. And so looking at group demographics and things like that, I don't think is necessarily bad identity politics. It's just when it gets really divisive. And sometimes pointing out that, like, okay, me, middle-class white woman, I'm going to have huge blind spots, people pointing that out to me. I don't think that's an attack on me. It's just a different opinion. And, it's just a pointing out of a blind spot. It doesn't have to be taken as divisive, that just because someone says, well, hey, look, you're a middle-class white woman, you may not realize this happens, but it does. Please note that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine. Hello?
Oh, I'm here. I just wanted to do a screen share, and
cool.
one of the things that bother me about how tribalistic and vitriolic people were during the elections is that about half of the country didn't bother to vote at all. Therefore, it's kind of like half the country hated both candidates equally. Like when it comes to Trump and Hillary Clinton, it's about 25% for both of them, and about 47% of Americans didn't vote at all. So a large chunk of people just hated both. They don't like Trump, don't like Hillary.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't know Gary Johnson. I mean, that's the other thing is, people are like, you're throwing your vote away voting for Gary Johnson. He doesn't stand a chance to win. And it's like, in this particular case, it's not a casting a vote to, help him win. It's casting a vote saying, I want that third option.
Yeah, and also because with the electoral system, depending on the state you're in, now we're in a state that goes 100% blue. I mean, the idea of it ever going red, I don't see it happening anytime soon. So, when you're not in a swing state, I mean, it was going to go blue. It was going to go to Hillary. Then the question is, what's a good vote then there when your electoral vote can go one way or the other?
I can't hear you. I just hear a lot of squeaking.
Can you mute?
Can you mute? I could hear you now, but just barely.
Do you mind muting? We're getting a lot of feedback.
Okay.
Because I was saying was that we're in a state that goes very blue. And if you're in a state that goes either red or blue, but you're not a red or blue person, then kind of what do you do with your vote too? Because really, the electoral system, I do think, does have its issues where people do start to feel a little bit disenfranchised of, well, why bother to turn out if my vote's really not going to count because my state is going one way?
Yeah, that's how it does feel sometimes. It's kind of like I did feel like, why bother voting if my votes isn't really going to count, because no matter how I vote, it's usually going to be red no matter how I vote personally, you know. So it almost feels like empty voting if you know that it's going to turn out red or turn out blue for you. So anyway, let's switch topics sort of to the alt-right. Do you want to talk about that, or?
Well, what aspect do we want to talk about first?
Okay. Let's see. You're to the left, so you probably heard this before. Do you hate yourself for being white?
Nope. I have no problem with my skin color, and in fact, I kind of like my skin color because I tan pretty easily. I don't get sunburns. I mean, I'm perfectly fine with my skin. Perfectly fine with my background. As people may know if they follow me at all, I am half Scottish. My dad's from Scotland. You know, quite fond of Scottish culture and, you know, wear the family tartan, and not all the time, of course. But yes, I do have, my mom gave it to me because when they got married, she got a very traditional dancer's kilt. And the thing is wool and warm as anything. And so, yeah, in the winter I wear it and I'll wear it to work because it's warm and it's awesome and I like it. I never felt the feeling that, you know, we're not supposed to like who we are or our family or our heritage. But I mean, I never think of myself as a white, white doesn't mean anything.
And there's so many different shades of white. I mean, when I first met Liv, you know, she's got a very olive skin and she tans very well. And my family heritage comes from the northern side of Wales. So, you know, you compare the two of us and I'm significantly paler in comparison than her. During the summertime, she tans and she gets extremely dark. So, you know, skin colors are, you know, no matter where you are geographically located around the world. And that's something that we all should celebrate. So no matter what colors you are. One of my best friends is Filipino. His wife was white. His two children have just, you know, beautiful skin. Where do you even put that in a classification? Why does that even matter? So I think, you know, it comes down to we all should be comfortable in our skin. And I think it's, for me, it's just a sad thought that if somebody was uncomfortable with themselves because of those conditions.
Yeah, and you never see the left going out to protest a Scottish festival, Greek festivals. No one's protesting people actually celebrating their heritage. We'll go protest the Klan because that's not about heritage. That's about hating people because they're dark-skinned.
Yeah, because one of the things I hear about feminists is that you hate white people, you hate white culture, you want to destroy white culture because you hate being white so much, and that you just want to destroy. You want to go out and destroy white culture and destroy white nations.
No, I mean, I may be the one person in the world who actually likes bagpipe music, and destroying white culture would mean that there is no Scotch. Well, destroying Scottish culture would mean there is no Scotch, and I really don't want to be in a world without Scotch. So no, I'm not about destroying white culture. But I mean, this whole idea that there is a white culture is BS. Okay, talking about in Scotland, long history of wars between clans. So this is clans within Scotland fighting each other or liking each other at various points of history. the Scots' view of the English, not really all that fuzzy and friendly. They've fought for a very long time, the Scots on the Welsh. And we laugh because Dwight's family is Welsh. And again, oh my God, a Scot and a Welsh person marrying. My dad sort of cracked a few jokes about that. And actually from my dad, the first, I guess you could say, like, slur I ever heard was against French people. They're called the frogs for eating frog legs. The Scots on the French, there it depends if you're Catholic Scottish or Protestant Scottish to a certain extent, but really didn't like the French. Germany as a united nation, that's a relatively new invention. Same with Italy. England and France fighting for centuries. I mean, this whole idea that white people have a common culture is just made up. We don't.
Yeah, that's something that the alt-right does. They act like white people have like one culture, that it is just white Western culture, when really it's not really white culture, because by white culture, I think they really mean by different white nationalities. When really, like, if you're going to look at Scottish and France and Germany, I mean, they've all been to war with each other, you know.
Well, and also there's this notion that, say, England or Scotland, these were historically always white and they didn't have any black people. But James, I think it was James IV, or in the Scottish court in 1488, they had the Black Moors from Northern Africa. These were, black people in the court there. Some of them were servants or slaves, but there were also a number of musicians, artists. Their drumming hugely influenced Scottish military drumming. And so there's a lot of crossover there. Also, Moorish dancing, a very traditional style of English dancing, is believed to be influenced by the Moors that were in England. If you look at laws, during the time of Queen Elizabeth, they did have laws on where Africans could live. There were black people in England. It's not like these were always 100% white nations. And certainly when you talk about America, we were never all white. White people had to be brought in here. Originally, America was not white.
Yeah, to that point, my mother's bloodline, Native American Indian, and it's
they're Swanee, right?
Swanee Indian tribe. I'm 5 generations out from that. My mom was 4 generations out, but in my family, if you visually see a couple of my family members, you'll see the bloodline there. And for me, I just getting back to this whole alt-right concept, I really hope that I've never seen the numbers on it. I'd like to think that is such an extremely small faction of radical people that don't really represent, any of the values of our country. I mean, our country was founded on being very prideful of being a melting pot, being just everybody from everywhere coming to this country and enjoying our environment. So this whole alt-right thing just kind of blows my mind.
I don't know if you could see this. Can you all see this?
Yes.
Yep.
This is the Irish, like they view the Anglo-European as the best, but when it comes to the Irish, in the past, they didn't like the Irish all that much. Like, this is another image of an Irishman, or they just had horrible depictions.
Yeah, and there used to be, and you can still buy them. You can find old versions of them. The Nina signs, "No Irish need apply."
That's right.
And like this is really bad. As we've dared to call the monkeys in the zoo by Irish names, Aaron's sons in wrath declared us snobs and flunkies and demanded we withdraw them, nor should we ignore their claims, for it's really hard upon the monkeys. And it's a cartoon poem published in Life magazine May the 11th, 1893. The poem is suggesting that the monkeys in the zoo are said that they get called by are sad called by Irish names.
Yeah. And also, but and I've seen some people try to make the argument, it's like, well, Black culture in the US is allowed. Why can't there be white culture? Well, I mean, it ignores the reality of how immigration for white people coming from Europe and Black people coming from Africa historically were very different. I mean, the Scots chose to come here. And now my mom's side is French-German from Alsace. They chose to come here. They got to keep their food, keep their cultural practices, keep their names. They may have anglicized them a little bit, but more or less all that good stuff. They could keep everything. Keep their language. Now, Africans were brought over as slaves. Where they came from, the country that they came from, was lost. Language, religion, all of that gone. So the only thing that they had anymore to hold on to was the thing that was emphasized about them, which was skin color. They didn't know, did my ancestors grow up speaking Igbo, or was it another nation or another language? And also in terms of what country they came from, with European imperialism in Africa in the 1800s, 1900s, the nations that people came from changed because, Zaire, Congo, I mean, we changed what the nation structure was when there was European imperialism throughout Africa. So the entire history, a nation that was around in 1700 wouldn't be around the same way anymore anyway, and the languages got wiped out.
So it makes it tough to celebrate, your heritage and,
Yeah, that's true. Can you all hear me? Yeah, I found this article, and because the alt-right asked that the Jews are not white, like the Jews are, a different race altogether, but Ashkenazi Jews are genetically European. So it's kind of like, it seems like what they did to the Irish in the past. Like in the past, it was the Irish, and it's like all of these racist caricatures. But now it's okay for the Irish to be labeled black. I mean, it's okay for the Irish to be labeled white. But now the Jews are like some weird other race that happens to have really light skin, when Ashkenazi Jews are actually genetically European and is scientifically classified as white.
Yeah, and so all this, I just find all this race obsession that they have really silly. And also, I think ultimately, if they're trying to preserve European cultures, making it this hodgepodge white culture, actually, I think that kind of erases the difference and uniqueness of, okay, even in Scotland, what you get over in the Western Highlands is going to be very different from what's in Edinburgh. And you're kind of erasing some of the uniqueness of what was different in Bavarian culture, what was different in the thousands of different cultures you have throughout Europe. And if you really care about preserving those, doing this, mishmash, there's just white culture. I mean, that doesn't.
Well, my position on the alt-right is going to be probably no different than our friend Lauren Southern, and lump them all in the same. They're people trying to make themselves relevant by being just completely outlandish, and their position comes from a bad place. You can't tell me that any of what they're presenting comes from a good place as a human being. So I just, it's sad that they even get the stage to provide a viewpoint. I just don't think that they're worth that much effort. Sorry.
Yeah. And I know you really don't like Christy Winters, but she was having a discussion with Kevin Logan the other day, and she made a point about, having this alt-right attitude start to take over conservatism, and I agreed with her on this, and I'll sort of put it my own way, but I know she was talking about that it kind of diminishes. We don't hear from the Republican conservatives like Michael Steele, a Mitt Romney type, and Michael Steele is also conservative Republican, African-American. He was lieutenant governor from the state we live in and did a reasonable job. I mean, I disagree with it. Okay, so someone like Michael Steele, I disagree with his policies. And those are the people I want to have debates and discussions with, because they are smart. They're bringing challenging ideas. They're going to have to make me be a better leftist and actually think about real issues, not things we settled long ago that no, racism, being hateful, those are bad. Now let's start actually talking about the nitty-gritty of how we make society better. Because someone like a Michael Steele is not anti-Black people, is not, anti having a decent society. We just have a different view of how we get there. And that's an interesting discussion to me, and I think that's a fair discussion. But this kind of Steve Bannon stuff is just, I mean, what good does it serve to anyone?
Yeah, and I would read a little bit from chat. Basic Competence says, I'm Scottish. I'm a person of Tartan. I love bagpipe music too. The Moors are still celebrated in the north of England, annual traditional dances. In the 1970s, I remember seeing signs on the pub doors: no blacks, no dogs, no Irish.
Yep. And also there, my grandmother, my dad's mom, my mom remembered going over to visit them. And she was talking about what a horrible thing back when interest rates were like at 14%, that the Catholic Church was lending out money to young families to fix up some of the homes at 2%, and to fix up some of the homes and make them better. And my mom was like, well, what's so bad about that? And she's like, oh, don't you know, when the Catholics come in, there goes the neighborhood. And, and in Glasgow, I don't think the religious divide between the two soccer teams, the Rangers and the Celtics, is as big a deal as it used to be. But yeah, the one was the Protestant team, one was the Catholic team. That used to be a pretty big deal.
Yeah, and at one point of time, me and Madwin, we've talked about this before, but the Irish used to be prisoners of war, and they were sold as slaves to the Arabs. So the Irish, they're considered whites now by the alt-rights. The alt-rights like, yeah, you're white. But in the past, the people hated the Irish. I mean, prisoners of war, my goodness.
Well, and if we are going to talk, and if, people do want to talk about terrorism and religious terrorism, I mean, 1996 was when there was the Manchester City bombing from the IRA. So 20 years ago, the division between the Catholic and the Protestants was still, like, in our lifetime. That was still a pretty big deal. I mean, the IRA as a terrorist group, according to some, I mean, yeah, that's from my lifetime. And now it has turned around, and you don't see that same kind of problem to the same extent. I mean, is there still violence in Northern Ireland? Yes, it's not anywhere near what it was. But yeah, I mean, that was pretty terrible. And it's not that Islam is unique or any of these other cultures are unique in having this. It's just that how do we work to fix it? And continuing this us versus them and not trying to get people to work together is not helping it.
Yeah, like the alt-right has this idea that, white people have the ability to always reasonably resolve problems with each other. And like if you're white and you disagree with them, like you'll get a lot of hell from them. It's kind of a lot like, based mama, she's white, but she's been called a slut, a whore. And it's kind of a lot like, they're all about celebrating whiteness, and whiteness is great. But the moment you disagree with them and you're white, you're a slut, you're a whore, and they told based mama to die,
Yeah, and that's just stupid. And it does, well, actually, since you are the white man in the room, what are your thoughts?
I know my place. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it does a huge disservice to people who are white the way they act, that we're all this monolith, and any wanting of they make it harder for us. They're not helping white people.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
probably the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a guy who's an alt-right guy, he was like leaving me comments like your friends secretly hates you, and it's kind of like we're gonna convert them to the alt-rights, and you gotta be really concerned about our whites ethno states. I'll be worried about that if I were you and your people. It was a nice veiled threats, where it's like it's easy to figure out what he meant. Like, I'd be worried about that white ethno state if I were you. We all know what that means.
And I mean, why would you want a place where there's only one type of person?
Yeah,
that seems.
To that point, why do you want to be around 100% of the people just have the same viewpoints and same everything is like you're in agreement. To have disagreements or different positions, and kind of the relationship between Liv and I, we don't agree on a lot of things, but I can tell you we always have excellent conversations, and you hear different viewpoints and perspectives, and for me that's an environment that you learn in.
Yes, and I can say, as a leftist feminist married to a, I guess, conservative-ish white man, have I ever called you a Nazi?
No. I hope not. I mean,
and you've never called me a snowflake.
Yeah.
I mean, we get on just, we've actually never, I think, had a yelling, or we've disagreed.
Yeah, but it's usually policies. I mean, when it comes to treating people, I'm sorry. I don't even put myself anywhere close to that. That right wing. And that's, it's even, we're to a point now where I'm sometimes even concerned about calling myself a conservative or even calling myself a Republican, because, God forbid, if enough variables line up, you almost fit in that right, alt-right wing, which to me is ridiculous. And I don't want to be anywhere near that. So, that whole alt-right concept it bothers me.
You're not the only one. I tried to get Nick on. Nick is a Republican, or he's a conservative, and he also takes issues with the alt-right because he's afraid that more people are going to leave the Republican Party because the alt-right rhetoric is really divisive. And he's like, he says we as Republicans must distance ourselves from the alt-right because we're going to lose so many people this way. This is not the way to go about it. We need to stick with policies.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's also let the Republican Party crumble at this point.
What was that last sentence?
Mute. We were getting that echo.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Do you want
to just go ahead and repeat that? I agreed with everything you were saying, with the exception of I care less about the Republican Party surviving. If the right wants to go their own direction, let them go. Let the Republican Party crumble if that's the way it needs to be. This is where I'm probably not going to be liked by Republicans, but they're not getting it together. And if they're going to take those policies and positions of the alt-right and make it part of who they are, it needs to go with them.
I still wasn't able to understand you, but if you want, you could jump out and jump back in. And maybe if you jump out and jump back in, maybe the audio would clear up. Anyway, I would still answer your question.
Is the audio better?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, so yeah. And I think sometimes if we're trying to talk to you, if we both, and there's unmuting, or there's no one mutes, it ends up, I think that's where we start to get the static. We'll figure it out.
No, I'll try to answer what he was saying earlier, like why do they want to be surrounded by people like them? I was watching a live stream with Sargon of Akkad and Millennial Wolves, which was funny. I heard about it because of Rights Wing Watch, and they did indeed misrepresent Sargon because Sargon was trolling the whole entire time, and it got like really, really funny, especially like towards the end. And anyway,
to say I do personally have a I do not discuss Carl anything for views Benjamin policy.
Yeah, and Millennial Woes was kind of like, how come you don't care about white people? How come you don't care about white culture? And he expressed fear. He expressed fear, and ContraPoints mentioned this, that Black people would do to them what they've historically did to Black people. You know, they're afraid of, you know, if they are minorities in their own country, they're afraid of becoming slaves, afraid of being terribly mistreated. They're afraid, you know, basically they're afraid of, you know, Blacks, Muslims doing to them what they've historically done to others.
Yeah, and that's kind of, though, there's no need to worry about that. I mean, because if you look at really what's been happening in the U.S. with, yeah, we have more people coming in. And now if you look at probably who is the most economically dominant, if you're looking at it from a racial perspective, economically dominant Asians are, if you look at sort of who earns per dollar more, they're not doing anything bad to us. They're not kicking us out. I mean, I think by and large, a lot of people have gotten that, like, no, you can't, you know, this violent overtaking of a country. A lot of people, especially people coming to America, really don't want that. And if you're looking at Muslim immigration in the US, again, going back to the 70s and 80s, people leaving Iran, they wanted to get away from totalitarian, authoritarian regimes. They may still want to practice their religion, but they don't want that totalitarian state. They're not going to go create that here. That's why they came here in the first place. So this fear that they have of, you know, oh, they're going to come and do to us what we did to them. I mean, it's a totally unfounded fear. And I really don't think necessarily that they might say that's kind of a fear, that they're going to, you know, do this authoritarian overrun. But I don't think that is. I just think it's, you know, when they're not the only people around, then they realize that, oh, wait, you know, there are people in other places that are smart, intelligent, that, like, they're going to have to compete with people who might be better than them.
Yeah, and This is the fear that millennial Rose expressed. He says, Sargon, we cannot compete with the Jews and the Asians and the Muslims and the Mexicans and the blacks outbreed us. And, you know, I did find that a bit insulting because I don't even have children. But, you know, thanks for portraying me, you know, like I'm a rodent and just have like 100 kids when I have none. Hello, Troy.
Yeah.
Hey.
And you are a centrist, or
Very much. I mean, when I say the word centrist, it kind of, some people think that, you know, on every issue that I'm sort of straddling the fence, but, you know, in reality, it's, you know, I lean left on a lot of issues, you know, progressive on a lot of issues, but then on some issues, I might take a conservative kind of approach.
So you're centered to the left.
Yeah. So very much
yeah.
libertarian type left.
Yeah, I'm more of the centered right. But, you know, we have like a person who's centered right, centered left. We have a feminist, and we have a conservative. So now we have like, you know, we have diversity of thoughts, sort of, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Troy, there are two people under my account today. I don't know if you were here in the beginning, but there's me, and then there's Dew, my husband.
Oh, okay. And so you've got a, so we've got a good, so we've got the gender balance as well.
Yeah, we're 50-50.
Yeah, we're like, we like two men, it's two women, you know, a feminist, a conservative, a person who's centered right, and a person who's centered left. We really do have that nice 50-50 balance going on.
Yeah, because we've got like there's a feminist, and then there's like, and I wouldn't call myself an MRA per se, because I've got a problem with the main like poorly lamb wing of MRA. I'd probably use the word men's liberation or masculinism or second wave.
Oh, right. Aren't both you and Liv both for men's rights, or you do both care about men's rights issues? And
yeah, I would say Troy and I, because we've talked back and forth and we keep meaning to do something, talking about like Camille Paglia or something. I would say, yeah, I mean, I'm a politically pretty left-wing, not liberal left, feminist. But on men's issues, I mean, I think Troy and I don't want to speak for him, I think we're pretty similar in that, yeah, there are definitely men's issues out there that need to be addressed. The way what we're seeing on kind of YouTube MRAs very often, I don't think that's constructive or it helps. And I think a lot of times they're ignoring the actual, you know, public policy decisions that are hurting men in favor of just being mad at a feminist on a college campus who really has no influence to do anything because they're 19.
well, I remember the Lansing feminist. I think she made a video on it where she says that she feels alienated by the MRAs, because she says that she really does want to help when it comes to men's rights, but they keep being angry at her for being a feminist. So she feels like she's being pushed away from helping with men's rights issues.
Yeah, because that's why, because I reached out to her on Twitter and just, so we're probably going to be doing sort of a stream together where we can, where just she can sort of see the, I guess, the alternative to the mainstream MRA, which is a bit more, it's kind of more closer to the core of feminism, really. It's like we pretty much identify the same problem that affects both men and women.
Yeah. And Dew, if you want to chime in on your background on, I guess, feminism or men's issues or your 2 cents.
Well, I mean, the thing that I always found interesting about Liv is that she's certainly open-minded. As a feminist, she comes in and she's willing to listen to the complete picture. So, you know, but doesn't necessarily mean that she'll change her position. She'll stand her ground. But we watched an MRA video.
Yeah, well, okay, because the Red Pill documentary. Now, until you met me, did you ever hear about men's rights at all?
I must have lived in a shell, because I can't say that I really ever paid attention a lot to feminists or MRAs. I just kind of lived my life coaching football and doing. I just didn't tap into that particular discussion going on out there.
Yeah, but no, I did watch the Red Pill documentary and showed it to Do, just more as a discussion point of like, hey, when people talk about men's issues, these are the issues. The people on that video, if you dig into them, not necessarily the best, but I mean, these aren't issues that shouldn't be discussed.
Well, talking about the people in the video, so they're saying one thing on screen, but then you turn around and you watch other videos that they post out there, and certainly not necessarily their best material either. So I guess what the point is, there's MRAs that they do have some points that they make, even though some of their behaviors are certainly in conflict with feminists, shall we say.
Yeah, because I think that my MRA is it's more inspired by the 70s, because the 70s started off with men's liberation, where the message was, like, men are not success objects. So, we want the freedom to, like, if women are having the freedom to work, then, we also want the freedom to do what we want. So to do things that were traditionally done by women. So those two movements ran parallel. So there was no conflict. But then sooner or later, things got off track, very quickly, and it became more about a reaction against feminism rather than, an active, like a proactive discussion of what the men's issues are. And the Red Pill was good, but it was a little bit limited. It didn't really look at young men and some of the things they go through in high school, or even the issues that face trans men, because there's a underrepresentation compared to trans women. So that's also a kind of concern that I try to bring up.
I'm with you. You and I pretty much share the same viewpoints and time frames. So not gonna have much debates. Just hearing you speak, a lot of things that go through my mind, and I agree with you. So
yeah, because that's pretty much the thrust of what I like in my own videos when I make them. Pretty much the thrust of how I do it. But then I do a million other things on my channel too.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I do worried about people who I guess are rights leaning or perhaps libertarian leaning, pushing people away based off what label they carry to go, well, you're a feminist, so I don't want to work together with you for men's rights issues. When really, or it's like not looking at different perceptions of how to help men, because this was really interesting for me. I was visiting church one morning, and the preacher of the church was saying some of the exact same thing that feminists were saying. And like I live in the South, and it's traditionally right wing, and my states voted for Donald Trump by a landslide. But like the preacher of my church, he was kind of like, it's kind of like, I've been a psychologist for many years. Like, I think he's been a psychologist for like 20 or 30 years. And he was like, as a psychologist, men have a hard time expressing their feelings, and how he's just been trying to get men to articulate their feelings, so that their feelings do not convert into anger and whatnot. And like listening to this from a person who's a psychologist and, from a right-leaning states, it's kind of like, would his opinions gets dismissed as, say, beta male, or, I don't know.
I mean, that's the hypocrisy of the use of that language. It's, when they keep saying, cuck, mangina, beta male, faggot, and all that, and some of the tweets against, Steve Shives, like, even though I might not agree with him on a number of things, but it's the dignity. And, if you're for kind of men's rights, and you're accusing feminists of being a male, like anti-male, then, it's kind of hypocritical to be using such an anti-male language, like the cuck and the and just the caricatures they do of Steve Shives and all that. It's like it goes against it's anti-male, so I can't reconcile those two positions in my head.
All right, so this is due. I gotta sign off, but I'm gonna go do some cooking and change some clothes around, take care of my feminist wife, because I enjoy doing that kind of stuff. But yeah, I enjoy the conversation. Might be able to get back with you, but actually I'm kind of excited to get down to. I got a new dish in the kitchen I'm planning on cooking today. So
yeah, well, he's the better cook, but I have to say I am good in terms of doing the cleaning, and I am good with a vacuum.
all these rolls and boxes that we have to get put in with all these various different labels, it just makes me shake my head. It was a pleasure. Y'all enjoy.
Thank you. It was nice to meet you.
Yeah, I'll hang on for a little bit, but I do have to jump off in a little bit here, but I can hang on for just a few more minutes. But hi, Troy.
Hey, I've had such a it's been an amazing day of this is probably my fourth stream that I've had today. One of them was one of them was like a Star Wars review with loudmouth reviews, and oh god, it was painful. There was one fellow there who wouldn't shut up. He just kept going on, and he was cutting me off everywhere.
Ugh, that's no fun. Yeah. When did you jump on the stream?
On this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, only just then, because I was kind of I was doing some I was rehearsing for a performance thing I wanted to do on YouTube, and about an hour it's passed, and then I realized, oh fuck, Rin's tweeted me.
Oh hey. Yeah, so we were discussing earlier, it was some stuff with the alt-right and
the alt-right. Oh.
Yeah, and the idea of a kind of, this white identity politics and how it's just kind of silly and also massively ahistorical. And, before that, talking about Lauren Southern and her huge misrepresentation of Islam. And now I think we've, wandered off to men's rights and more.
Yeah, the alt-right. Yeah. It's the one thing that was it was almost amusing. You got these alt-right women who are they're complaining about the men are misogynistic, and I was like, okay, well, you need to make your what is it? Are you calling for intersectionality in your white supremacy movement?
Yeah, and it's kind of like, well, that is a it is a position that white nationalism, that was a position that requires a very, and I don't even want to say traditional. Actually, on another video, I've gotten into a debate with some people on what the traditional family was. And I see Rin's dropped off, so this is her channel and her stream, so I want to be very careful of that and cognizant of that, and be a well-behaved house guest, and not start spewing any kind of lefty propaganda on her channel. But with the alt-right, that requires that women are pumping out lots of white babies and staying home and taking care of the white babies, and not necessarily speaking out. Also, if they did know anything about the history of social movements around women and feminism, especially those who are Western-based, they would know a little bit about Phyllis Schlafly, and the woman kind of responsible for shutting down the Equal Rights Amendment in the early 80s, late 70s, early 80s. Now, she had grown... She was super traditionalist, married, had her kids, always did have a career, and then was a main advocate for, oh, yes, we need to keep the traditional, quote unquote, traditional family going. And even she was getting called out on her hypocrisy of, wait, you're saying women need to stay home as wives and mothers, yet you're out as an advocate. And, that they didn't see this coming, that eventually they were going to get some blowback, that, you're all very young and naive, aren't you? And you don't read very much.
Yeah, I mean, because I know that there was a time where obviously I was sometimes concerned about the overuse of identity or the weaponization of identity politics from the left, but it's not as harmful as what happens when I think about the way that it comes from the right. It's almost like it's so much more dangerous. Like the worst identity politics from the left, it's just a bunch of BuzzFeed articles or MTV shows or whatever. It's like the fuck white people articles and things like that. And it's thinking, well, you just ignore them. I mean, you don't have to sit there and read them, and you don't have to make a video to respond to it. You just, I just scroll down and find something else to read.
Yeah. The other thing also, a lot of times.
Sorry, I dropped out.
Let's see if I can.
Hello? Hey, Rin? Your mic is cutting out a lot.
Yeah, because mine was doing that last night. Like last time when I was with JPM last time, I had my mic cut out. Oh, it's like Google. It always, I don't know. I think it's getting worse. Like it seems to be more of a problem now.
Yeah, it does seem. I know our mic was going crazy all day. So, hopefully Rin will be back on. But, while she's here, I do want to be like a nice host or like nice guest and keep everything to the tone of her channel. So, anyway, it was kind of fun having Do around to talk, because I also do think, showing that, hey, actually in real life, people with slightly different views can not only just like get along, but actually love each other tons, and I think it's awesome. Obviously I married him. And yeah, we have different views, but that's cool. Hello, Rin.
Hello, can you hear me?
You're coming in really well.
It is a bell.
Hello? Hello?
Yep, you're good.
You're good to go.
Hear me now. That's great. It's my computer. It just automatically restarts itself. I don't know why, but my computer just automatically restarts itself, and it does it at different times too. Sometimes at night, sometimes at day, sometimes after I started. Like I could start it, and then it just shuts right back off after I just started.
Yeah. So speaking of the all right, like, because did you see some of the, I guess the tweets or whatever that that Milo Yiannopoulos clown that he came to Australia?
I've heard that he went to Australia, but I haven't paid that much attention to him.
No, it was really ridiculous because he spoke in front of the parliament, I think, and when he did his tour, his running joke was, it's okay, white Australia, like you can admit the Aboriginal art is shit. I was like, what the, like, how can you say something like that? It's, you've obviously haven't been to a museum and seen some of the particular style of painting that they have. It's like you're just judging it by, only certain things. It's, I don't know, you obviously haven't been to a gallery or something like that. It's just I don't know why you'd say something like that.
Oh, why he would say it's okay to be white. Some people do the troll, like some people do it just to be trolling. Like I've seen a few black people saying it's okay to be white, like Tyler Preston, your boy Pats. Those are some black people going around saying it's okay to be white. But it people believe that left-leaning people hates white people, or do you feel white guilt, like they're ashamed to be white, they're apologetic to be white, and they just hate being white and they're sick of it, like if they wanted to, like they think that the left is full of people like Rachel Dolezal, basically.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously that goes too far. There's no point. I mean, guilt it's not a constructive emotion to have.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even make sense to say, like proud to be white or okay to be white. I already know that it's okay to be like white. I don't need to signal it on Twitter or make a tweet about it. It's just accepted as common sense.
And also this idea that just because I may criticize a policy put forth by predominantly white people, that means I don't like being, like, I hate being white and I feel bad about being white. No, I mean, it's not the skin color, it's the actions. And like going back to what we were talking about earlier, and I think Rin in some Twitter messages when we were talking about, like, okay, yeah, me being Scottish, and yeah, I'll go to a Scottish festival. If there are, if there are people who aren't white there, that's great. I think that's awesome. I mean, yeah, caber tossing is fun if you can do it, if you have the strength. But it has nothing to do with skin color. It's a culture. So there's no exclusion based on skin color to me. It's, and so this stuff like here, I have a feeling these may be, I mean, who knows what these are? I've never seen something like that. But it's just people can participate in cultures of people who aren't the same skin color. Be respectful of who, don't steal a music, let's say, don't steal a musical style from another culture, put it out as your own and give no credit. That's not cool. That's theft. But I mean, if someone who's black wants to get into caber tossing and Highland games, I think that's cool. It's the culture that's neat, not the skin color. And, if a policy is bad and talking about, hey, this was a bad policy that people had, and especially if we're talking about something like slavery, yeah, it's important to bring up that it was white people doing it because they were the ones in there who owned slaves if we're talking about the US. But that doesn't mean, oh, don't be comfortable being white or, feel bad about being white. Feel bad about the policy and make sure it doesn't happen again.
Yeah, I mean, it's because from an Australian perspective, I think it doesn't make sense for people to say to have like a white identity or whatever. It doesn't seem to make sense because what does that mean? I mean, because I'm happy to say, proud to be Australian because, it's not based on race because Australia is very much a fusion of, a lot of Asian culture because we live in the Pacific. There's obviously a lot of Asians who live here. So we've absorbed a lot of their cultural traditions and they've absorbed ours. And so that's part of what makes Australia very interesting is that kind of fusion of Western and Eastern traditions that have come together, very, very smoothly. And as well as there's Indigenous traditions as well that get absorbed into culture as well. And, we still have a problem with the Indigenous population. There's still a lot of metrics that are in just about every metric. It's bad. The suicide rate is very high, but yeah, that's why it sort of doesn't make sense because it's such a multiracial kind of background that, when you think of Australia or being proud of that, it's not really an ethnic thing. It's really a cultural.
Oh, and I do see a question in the chat from Chris Jones and adding the feminist. So I assume that means me of, the question is, so what do white people have in their culture that people of color shouldn't take, or it's called theft? Well, again, I don't want to say it's like as simple as like white people as a group do this thing and people who aren't white shouldn't take it. But let's say, okay, again, using Scotland as an example. Okay, particular when they're doing when they're making sweaters, particular patterns in the knitting and everything like that. And let's say you find a little village out in the Western Highlands near Glen or something. Really awesome sweaters. They're doing it a different way. Someone comes in, takes that technique that they're using, gives no credit, never mentions where it comes from, and they start selling it for tons of money and never give credit to the original people or never discuss where this really comes from. Yeah, that's theft. That's not cool. But again, this whole idea that there is a massive, like in the US, unified white culture doesn't exist. It just isn't the same way. So yeah, and again, Black culture, because the individual national cultures that people had before they were forcibly brought to America got erased, that's very different. Now with current immigration and where you do have people coming from Africa and they do know that they're Nigerian or they do know where Ethiopian or they do know where they're from, that yes, they'll be very specific about, okay, this is Ethiopian cooking, this isn't Black cooking.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to native, I guess the native indigenous lands, because that's usually what happens is it's not about having rules saying, you know, you can't wear this, you can't wear that. It's about sort of, I think it's about having a certain amount of respect. So, for example, if there's like partaking in indigenous type cultures, you know, there is a lot of cultural exchange. Like the elders, they come and visit schools and they teach kids how to do Aboriginal painting, and you know, there's certain businesses that actually, you know, take, you know, white people on tours around the native lands and then they do face painting on them or whatever. So that's obviously, you know, even though you're kind of absorbing aspects of their culture, you know, there's something that's being given in return, like they're being compensated by that, and they're sort of teaching you how to do it. Whereas if you just go and like do it by yourself, and if as a white person, if I was to like start, you know, painting, you know, Aboriginal style art and then charging money for it, you know, based on a style that's mine, I mean, that wouldn't make sense. But if you're learning how to do it from an Aboriginal elder and as an educational thing, that's a good thing. And the same would apply for like native indigenous tribes, because there's certain ceremonies they go to and it's under the guidance of the elder, I guess, or the people there. They sort of teach you how to do the things there. So it's a big difference.
Yeah, and I can give an example from pop culture of a white guy sort of learning from a different culture, right? Back in, I think it was the late 90s, it was the early 2000s, got hugely influenced by Middle Eastern music, and used a lot of that influence in one of his albums. Now, on that album, probably the biggest hit from that was Desert Rose, where he partnered with Cheb Mami, who was a very famous Middle Eastern musician, but not too popular outside of the Middle East. And that got Cheb Mami huge visibility, huge new market. So he was inspired, he was influenced. But not only did he not steal credit, but he also made sure to give the artists who inspired him credit and help promote them. So, I mean, it's not that like, oh, because you're a white guy from another culture, you can't use this stuff. It's just, you know, don't be a jerk about it.
No, it's like, because the originator of that culture should benefit somehow from it.
Exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, the reason why I have this up is because this is why people are saying like it's okay to be white, because this is how what people call SJWs, like how anti-SJWs view what they call SJWs. This is how they see people, like people who make feminist content. Basically, they see feminists as being, you know, like so sorry and feeling white's guilt. And this is why I have like those you know, pictures up, because to me it describes what anti-SJWs, like, you know, people who make that type of content view, like people who make SJW content when they talk about like white's guilt. But I think that was a pretty good explanation of where you guys are coming from, that, you know, Black people, they just know that they come from Africa, but they don't know if they come from Tanzania or Nigeria or Ethiopia. They don't know specifically where they come from. So it's just Black American culture, because you don't know which part of Africa you're from. Not only that, but that part of you is gone because people got swapped around, people got torn away from their family, people were taught English. So, you know, that part of you is gone. So it's now Black American culture, while white people would have Irish culture. And you would say, this is Irish. You would say that this is German. You would say pizza is Italian. And you would give credits to Italian culture. You're not going to be like, well, this is white culture and it belongs to whiteness. You say that Italians have the pizza, or Italians, you know, have the lasagna, and, you know, Mexicans, they have like the tacos and the burritos. You would give some form of credit. You'll still eat at Taco Bell. You'll still eat at Pizza Hut, but you acknowledge that, you know, pizza is Italian. You'll acknowledge that burritos and tacos are, you know, Mexican. And you'll be like, yeah, it's Mexican, but you'll still eat it, you know. I don't know if I described that accurately, but I tried.
That was good. Because that photo, it's kind of because it like these are white people who are doing this, but is that really what? Because when I read certain articles saying this is how to be an ally to people of color, and like the one thing they say is, you know, don't center the like. It seems like what they're doing is it's almost it's like their feelings and their feelings of guilt are the things that are being, you know, centered around, and isn't that what we have to get away from? Like the
Yeah.
not
Also,
center the conversation around.
I'd also want to know the story behind that. Like, is it people mocking the white guilt thing?
It could be, yeah.
Like, was this a sort of photo shoot to mock that? I mean, what is the story behind it?
I don't know the story behind it, but I was in a live stream with Modeling and Carlos, and it and a person called MC Clark happened to be there, and MC Clark happened to share it. That's
Yeah.
all I know.
Yeah, and that's always though with these pictures, you know, if I take something out of context, it could look very different from what it is. So I don't want to say, like, me personally, as a white person who has gone to a Black Lives Matter event, and you know, where I am, there were some fairly big African American festivals. I mean, I've gone to them, and just because, you know, I like going to different kind of cultural events, there was no requirement to self-flagellate. It was more just, oh, okay, you're here, cool, well, participate. You know, the artists and the vendors who are selling things there, buy their stuff, eat the food, you know, show up, and there's no big deal. Go to tents where they're having lectures, go learn some things. There was no requirement for, you know, white self-flagellation involved whatsoever.
No, because it's taking away that it's taking attention away from the important things. You know, because it's a useless activity that's taking attention away from more important issues, or even the celebration of, you know, cultural events like that. Because I guess it's an important thing when because I listen to certain music that has a, I guess it originates in Ghana. It's like the dance, what do they call it, dance hall type tribalistic tribal music fused with like modern electronic sort of stuff. And so I listen to that. But then you're buying CDs and you're sort of supporting the artists who are, you know, making this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and actually, I do have to get moving on from the chat here. I've got some things I've got to get to today. But it was lovely talking to everyone. And Daisy and Chris in the chat, hello. Hope everyone has a good day, evening, whatever time you're in.
Yeah, this is the first time we've actually streamed together. This is
No, we'll have to do this again.
Yes, definitely.
All right.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
it was nice having you on. You're welcome to come back again. Thank you.
Thank you as always, Rin. You're very, very kind. Bye.
Bye. And I'm glad that you came to I will start reading from chats. Let's see. DC Pumpkin says, I don't watch feminist or anti-feminist live streams anymore. Both sides are just too biased and concerned with bashing the other side. Centrist live streams are always better and more objective. And Chris Jones says, yep, I feel the majority of humans can't use both sides of the brain at the same time. Um, that was Chris there. Let's see. Back to DC Pumpkin. She says neither black people nor white people should steal bad hairstyles from each other.
Yeah.
She also says ancient Scottish people had dreadlocks, and yeah, that was also an issue earlier where there was this white kid who had dreadlocks, and a black woman grabbed his head, I think, or I think she started pushing him around, and he was trying to tell her that some white people have hair that naturally mats. So it's not like black people own dreadlocks. And he tried to go over the history of all the white people who had hair that had dreadlocks. He was like talking about like the Vikings had dreadlocks and whatnot.
That's sad when you take it to such an extreme level of that kind of level of I guess aggression when it comes to those, because I remember seeing that video and I thought that's ridiculous, because there's a lot of because nobody really owns a particular hairstyle unless it's
yeah, nobody owns a particular hairstyle. I mean, black people tend to, use hair straightener or, weave. But and for me, I don't use weave. I use a hair straightener. I chemic I get my hair chemically straightened once in a while.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying nobody owns a hairstyle. People, I don't really care, as long as the person is not going out of their way to be rude to me, I really don't care what they do. Like, there are women in Japan who, tan their skin really dark, and they talk about how much they love black culture, and they try to look, like the girls in a rap and hip hop album. And I'm not offended. I'm not like, oh no. I mean, you're taking that away from me. It's like, nah. I mean, I really don't care. It really means nothing to me. And even the people who do go out of their way to be rude to that extent, they usually look ridiculous. Not only are they ridiculous, and people usually laugh at them, but they also usually get the backlash that they deserve. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because Japanese, I don't know, it's kind of sad because they've got such a very rich culture, and it's kind of sad to see them wanting to be too much like white people or black people. It's they've got a heritage of their own that's very, very that's fascinating. Like it's the whole world loves them.
well, Well, think about it. Think about it. If you are in Japan, everybody looks the same to you. Every day you're surrounded by people that look the same. You probably get bored. You probably get tired. You probably want things to be more diverse. And so you have people who dye their hair blonde and wear blue contacts, and you have people whose skin really dark and to look like black people because you're surrounded by people and they all look the same. I mean, it's kind of like I know that they don't look exactly the same, and I know that they could tell the difference. But at the exact same time, you're constantly surrounded by people who look similar. They're all skinny. They all have black hair. They all have hazel eyes. They probably just want something different. They probably want some blood and diversity, and they probably appreciate some diversity.
Yeah, because that's why white people are sort of lucky in a way, because you could have like blonde hair, dark hair, red hair, whatever, and all the different eye colors. So that's one of the ways in which it's there's kind of an advantage of um that kind of thing. But that's not something I've never really cared about, the fact that because I've always had like dark hair and dark eyes. So I kind of have, I don't know, I think I've got a like kind of Latino type blood in me, or Mediterranean or something like that, because I'm kind of a very mixed breed, very mixed race.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, I mean Scottish, mainly Scottish, but then there's also a part of me that it's gone back from grandparents or great parents or what, but that gene must have like passed down and really like concentrated itself in mine, because the rest of my family looks kind of, they've got like either green eyes or like blue eyes or whatever, but I've got like a very dark brown eyes, and like my skin can go almost like the color of a black person if I'm out in the sun too long, because I tan very very well. And the only problem is I get mistaken for like an Arab sometimes if I'm at the airport. And so at the airport, like if I haven't shaved, then I look like a Middle Eastern person. So it, yeah, they give you a hard time at the airport.
Oh, I want to read from the chats a little bit more.
Yeah.
So Chris Jones says, "Thank you for the rational arguments. It's really helpful having alternative perspectives. I was more interested in the youngster's reaction to the video. That's the white kid with the dreadlocks. Um, and they see, oh, that's really nice. Nancy Pumpkin says these live streams and chat sections are always polite, avoiding parts of YouTube that just become antagonistic. Oh, JPM. Let's see. Let's see. So that was interesting. I do love reading out chat because you know, I am interested what other people have to say. If there's a topic that I didn't cover that I should have covered, you know, because if there's a topic I didn't cover, I would like to cover it. And I do try to have as many perceptions on as possible. Like, you can see me talking to anti-feminists too. Like, I'm in, modeling live streams with Carlos, and they are anti-feminists. I do try to, I do like a diversity of thought, because when you have that diversity of thoughts, you could really grow and mature as a person instead of being in an echo chamber and surrounded by people who think like you.
Oh yeah, I mean, that's where, because some of it's those larger channels, and I think they've just collapsed on themselves, because today on the Twitter, everyone was talking about Crowd and T, and Andy Warski, and a lot of YouTubers, something to do with the Discord server or something like that. And I was thinking, what? I didn't I really didn't get what was going on.
Oh yeah.
Something big.
It's really petty drama at this point. It's just some drama with the alt-right, but it's not beyond the alt-right. It's just like now Krasinski got into some fight with Aridan or Aladdin, and he got into another fight with V, and V is kind of like, I feel betrayed because you're my friend, and I don't want to discuss that type of petty drama in my channel. Like, sure, if it's like a serious topics about thoughts and different perceptions, then I'll do that, but I'm not going to discuss, the conflict between Croughton V and Croughton Aiden, because people could always go to V's channel. It's up on V's channel if you want to see it. It's
Yeah.
up on Andy Warsey's channel if they want to see it.
Yeah, it's doesn't interest me that much. Like maybe once, maybe 6 months ago, like I would have had popcorn out, but now it's like I don't really feel like I want to spend my time watching those channels. Like either the SJWs or the anti. I don't watch their channels much anymore. Like I find some really good channels that are the smaller size or medium size that they tend to have more what's the word? Like a lot more nuanced and just more intelligent content. Like there's some really real gems out there that are kind of dangerously undersubscribed.
I
Yes,
think
I agree with Chris Jones. So turning off the notification for those channels. Yeah, that's a
I
good idea.
I think that the bigger you are, the more you're likely to surround yourself with people to think like you in the independent echo chamber. I could be wrong about that because there's exceptions like Philip DeFranco, and Philip DeFranco actually does seem to try his best to get both sides. It's like this is what people, from this side are saying, and this is what people, from that side are saying, and this is what I'm saying. And to a certain extent, Dave Rubin is like that, but not so much because you see more conservatives on his channel than left-wing people. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've never had a problem with anyone like that, or Dave Rubin, or like even though the people who are on there are primarily the anti, or they belong, the YouTubers are the anti SJW type channels. It's like I don't really care what he decides to do. I mean, that's his channel, and a lot of people want to watch that and listen. That's fine.
Yeah, I just think it's important to listen to as many thoughts as possible, and that's why I talk to some people who are feminists. I talk to some people who are anti-feminists. It does get confusing sometimes because they frequently talk past each other. And it's really sad. It's really sad that people talk past each other and things get lost in translation, or people would use the same word but it would have a different meaning. A person would just say this word to mean this, and another person would use the same word to mean that, and or a person could say something and the other person would misinterpret what that person is saying. So it's just talking past each other. But anyway, we've been going on for 2 hours now, so I'll guess I would close it unless anybody has any questions. If you have any questions, I hope you can type really fast because
Thank you so much
otherwise.
for thank you so much for having me on your channel, and so thank you to all the people in the chat. So there's Ronald, Chris Jones, JPM, Daisy Pumpkin.
Do you want to talk about any upcoming videos that you're about to have? As you're closing.
Yeah, I'm about to do I want to do a review of the Star Wars film, and the other one, oh yeah, I have to do I'm going to do another music cover as well.
Are you going to do any more book reviews?
Yeah, I've got to try and read a certain book. I've got to try and find something good. I've never done a movie review before, so I'm going to try and do the Star Wars thing. But mostly, my last one was about I reviewed different things. Like I do like a poetry like I do poetry reading sometimes. So I like there's one video where I chose 4 of my favorite poems and did like sort of like an analysis of that. Kind of like what you did with Dorian Gray. But I sort of did that with poetry. And I did that with the importance of being earnest as well.
Yeah. So thank you for attending, and I am grateful for all of you for watching. Bye bye everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay.